my name is Jonathan Williams. I'm here today with Eyes on Books. My co-host today is Terry Kelsall, and we will be talking about Craig Johnson's book, First Frost. It's one of a series of books, and we're going to just talk about what we liked and enjoyed and whatever else comes to our mind. Terry, good to have you here. What did you think about the book?
I find Westerns, and this was a Western.
Yes, yes it is.
A little difficult for myself to digest.
Yeah.
It was a mystery, and a very intriguing mystery. But coming from the Western point of view, it wasn't quite as interesting for me to stay involved with.
See, that's interesting because on my side, that just topped it off. I grew up with Westerns, and so we grew up with the Lone Ranger and Gunsmoke and all those good guys, and the whole Western idiom. You know, you've got the mountains, the plains. I was going to ask him, I forgot to do this. Why are there no horses in this? Everybody drives a truck. Nobody rides a horse. But anyway, so you're right.
Well, they did drive trucks in this one.
Yes, they did.
But, and they did have what I pictured as an incredibly handsome hero.
Oh, yeah.
A very big, handsome hero. I would have loved to have seen him, 250 pounds of all muscle.
Yeah.
But with a 100-pound surfboard that served no purpose unless you were in Malibu where he started his adventure. But beyond that, and he was a gentleman.
Read the series. I find him a very appealing character. One of the things I do like about him, you remarked earlier that he's such an even keel kind of person.
Yeah, very.
And in our mixed up world today, it's kind of a relief to have, of course, a murder comes along, we have to solve the murder, but it's the steadiness of the characters, and in all of his books, the same characters reappear. I think another character in the book that I do like is the actual state of Wyoming, where the stories take place. It's a character in the story. The mountains and the plains and the way they describe things. I'd like to go visit Wyoming. That was one of my thoughts. Well, maybe if I read enough of his books, so one day I'll make the trip out there and become familiar with it firsthand. So, I'm biased toward Westerns. I'm sure not all of us are. But what you notice in Walt is that tendency to just rush in headlong without thinking. When I was his age, when this book takes place, when I was 22, I was timid. I would never have run into the surf to rescue people or fought off bad guys right and left.
Well, I've been to Wyoming.
Oh, what did you think?
I've traveled the country.
Okay.
And Wyoming reminded me of many of the other states that I traveled through as I did cross country.
Right.
So it didn't stick out as a unique state.
I suppose it's not very populated, so I understand.
It is not.
The least populated state, so there's a lot of state and not a whole lot of people you're going to encounter.
That was nice about it. Not a whole lot of people.
Just scenery, for those of us who like scenery. But it's part of the American experience, that sense of the openness, the Wild West, the open plains, what have you.
Now, you have read the entire series?
No. I read this book and one other, but I've also enjoyed the TV series.
I do recommend, I jumped in, this was my first book in the series, and I recommend that people read a few before this book so they have an understanding of what's gone on before and they can build on the character of Walt
Well,
instead of just jumping in. It was a good read. It was a very easy read. And the mysteries that are involved in this particular book of First Frost are substantial. You have some deaths. You learn about the Japanese internment camps. Well, one camp. And what happened to those individuals. Very sad story.
I'd like to go back and read the first in the series where Craig Johnson introduces us to the character of Walt Johnson. Walt Longmire. When he introduces us, and we get to know the character for the first time, there was something appealing about that character. I recommend, if you want to get a taste of it, you're not quite sure you're ready, if you can find the TV show. It's gone 4 seasons on different streaming services. I can find it today. I think it's on Paramount Plus streaming service. You may find it elsewhere. So it's The Longmire is the name of the series. It's his stories, and it's played by a wonderful actor who embodies our hero, Walt Longmire.
I would love to see what character they put in there, because I have in my mind this gorgeous looking man who is huge, muscle bound.
Yes, he is.
And just even tempered, because as I was going through the reading of this, actually I did it on audiobooks, but I just had these pictures going on in my head.
Well, I think we would certainly want to invite all of our viewers to have a look. Go to your local library. You'll find a whole shelf full of these Craig Johnson, Longmire series books. I think you'll enjoy them, and try the TV show. I think that'll get you hooked. So thank you, Terry. It's been a good conversation, and now the moment has come. The time to invite our speaker. Today, we're going to be joined by Craig Johnson. Straight from Wyoming. Welcome, Craig. I'm going to lead off with some topics I'd like to talk to you about.
Okay.
I thought I would ask you.
I have to be honest with you and tell you that the most exclusive club that I'm a member of is being a member of Ucross, Wyoming, population 26.
Well, I think that's important. See, I was going to.
That's important that I get that in there.
Well, it is. Craig, I was going to lead off with who is Walt? So I want to introduce the character, and then secondly, after I did that, I was going to ask you, who are you? I want to know a little bit more about your background. And the third thing I wanted to touch on, we have a lot of people in our local community who like writing. We have Writers Club, Publishing Club, Storytelling Club. So I wanted to touch on, have you talk about writing? How do you do that? I love your story about the first 2 chapters were in the drawer for 10 years. I love that story. So anyway, let me start off with, I got to do this. The first sentence in the book, you are too big to surf. And that's the way you introduce those who are unfamiliar. That's how you introduce the character of Walt Longmire, which we come to know as the sheriff of Absacola, Wyoming.
No, Absaroka.
Absaroka
County.
Absaroka County. All right, let me start off. Introduce the character. Who is Walt?
Well, the Walt that we all have known over the last 20 years, look at with the 20 novels in the series, 3 novellas and a collection of short stories, another collection of short stories coming out probably next year. He's the sheriff of the least populated county in the least populated state, which happens to be Wyoming, which is where I'm speaking to you from now. And I don't know, though, but it's a little bit different, though, in First Frost. In First Frost, it's a little bit of a cast back. One of the things I learned very rapidly is that when I first started writing the books, everything in crime fiction was pretty much noir. It was all, alcoholic divorce detectives burying bodies in their backyards and everything. And I just thought, the people that I know in law enforcement, are really good people that make a lot of sacrifices. And so maybe you go in a different direction with that. And I thought maybe have it be the sheriff of the least populated county, the least populated state. So I'm a genius, right? The only problem is how many people can you kill in the least populated county, in the least populated state until things get kind of ridiculous. So I started doing things a little bit differently. One of the things I found out very quickly is that you're not anchored in the chronology and the geography that you start with. Like that, there are options. You can do different things. You can take those characters and jump around, in a different time period. You can move them outside of that county and kind of broaden, Walt's jurisdiction enough so that it makes it a little bit more interesting. And so anyway, one of the ways that I did that was with this particular book, First Frost. I was curious. I was curious as to what Walt was like and what Henry was like at different periods in time in their life. And it seemed to me that one of the biggest transitions in their lives, like that, was probably something along the lines of when they graduated from college and lost their deferment, and went away to Vietnam. One of the things I think was kind of important as far as the development of the characters was concerned was I kind of laugh every time Hollywood has, the pizza delivery kid pick up an AK-47 and suddenly know how to operate it. Generally, you need a little bit of training, to be able to do the things that a lot of the characters do in these type of books. And so I thought, they're going to have a military background. That's the easiest way, for them to learn all the things that they need to learn to survive all the things I'm going to throw at them. And so that's what I decided. I thought, I'm going to start this book off, with them graduating from college, and they're going on this epic road trip. Henry has to report to Fort Polk, Louisiana, to Tigerland, like that, and Walt has to report to Parris Island off the coast of South Carolina, like that, and as the Marine Corps. And so they have this one last big hurrah, like that, where they take off on this epic road trip. And of course, this entire book, the majority of it takes place in 1964. Well, what's the road that you take to go across the United States in 1964?
Was there
it's got to be
wasn't even a road there hardly? Well, along the way.
So they take off on this road trip like that, and of course the question then at this point in time with this type of book is how far do they get before they get into trouble? Like, well, they barely make it out of California and into Arizona before things start falling apart for them like that. But as the book starts out, as you noted in that very first paragraph, like that, they've decided to pick up surfing. Walt's actually an offensive lineman for USC, which played in a Rose Bowl where they've defeated Wisconsin like that, and it's kind of their last chance, to be out there on the beach, before they get shipped off to Vietnam and after their basic training like that. And one of the big running jokes all the way through the book is because Walt does have this oversized surfboard sticking out of the back of his ranch truck that he was been driving through college like that, and everybody keeps asking him and telling him, "You're way too big to surf," like that, because he's a very large guy. He's about 6'5", he's about 250, 260 some pounds like that, and so it's kind of a running joke like that. But one of the things I discovered, though, to quickly throw this in like that, is I know I'm talking too long like that, but I wanted to squeeze this in like that. Do you know who else was a really fantastic surfer there in Southern California? Was James Arnaz, the actor that played Matt Dillon in Gunsmoke. He spent a lot of time out there on the beach. Like he originally from Minnesota, like that, but I think, once he came to California, he decided he was going to surf, and I guess he was very, very good at it. And he was a big guy too, so
it can be
kind of followed that Walt would be able to.
One of the things I noticed, especially in the book, I'm a fan. I enjoy the TV show and I enjoy the books, and one of the things I enjoyed about this book, looking back at Walt's early life, is how much he remains kind of the same. That rush into danger, that sense of the things, the values that keep coming up when you get to know the character. There's such a repeated emphasis in all of your writing on rescue. We're going to rescue somebody. Another thing that keeps coming up in your work is people gone missing. They're going to find that person. They are. Loyalty. hugely important in all of your stories. There's that estimate, Terry, we talked about that, the
Yes.
loyalty, that sense of a traditional way of life that is I think that's very appealing today. You're known as a mystery writer, but the other part, that hardly covers it to me. A mystery writer is a book I read because I want to know who done it. In your stories, I'm so interested in the characters and how they're going to handle the situations. What you do in this book that's remarkable is that whole Japanese internment situation. That came, I don't know where that came. I was going to ask you about that. What intrigued you about, is it actually the proximity to an actual Heart Mountain camp that brought it to your attention? Or have you, I think it's more than that. If I know you at all, it's that you really have a very personal and deep commitment, interest in disadvantaged communities, certainly Cheyenne, the Indian communities, the Japanese Americans during the internment. But it's interesting. The point I wanted to make there, actually, roundabout, is it's the same character. I've gotten to know him as the person he is, that he's now the whole sheriff of the county, and he's going to be the way he's going to be,
I have just one thing to add to this. He is so even-keeled throughout the entire book. I have never encountered a male character, alive or in a book, that is so even-keeled, never angered. I mean, his friend Henry has a temper, but
Good.
But this one, no. Walt is just like walks a line that is so balanced, even in his character as sheriff. He does not lose his temper. It didn't appear that he did.
He doesn't, does he? I think I noticed that in you. Walt has a code to live by. He's got it's right. It's the way things ought to be. What appealed to you? But you created this guy.
Well, I don't know where to start. I don't know which question to answer. First of all,
Mine is an observation.
Okay.
Mine is simply an observation.
No. That's fine. That's fine, and you're absolutely right. One of the things that you said also about Walt, I tend to refer to Walt as kind of a detective for the disenfranchised. There are an awful lot of aspects of our society which are kind of shuttled off to the side like that, and. In Absaroka County, there's no sliding scale for, justice. Everybody gets the same justice. And that kind of comes from that unflappable kind of quality that Walt has. He has that ability to be, a darn good police officer like that. And one of the things that you learn very quickly is that emotion is not one of the things that you want to have contaminating an investigation like that, or tampering with the way that you handle people or the things that you do, for people. You try and be as even-handed as you can possibly be like that. And then as far as the character was concerned, whenever this big book starts, this ship has, hit the rocks, out off of the point there in Malibu, like that Point Doom, which is, terrible name for a rock outcropping out there like that. But anyway, he and Henry both could actually dive into the water to go and see if they can get these guys out, because there are people drowning. These guys are falling off this boat out there, and some of them can't swim, and so they have to go out there and try and save them. And this is actually an instance, you'll enjoy this, that I took from a book by Duke Kahanamoku like that, who was I guess the father of longboard surfing like that, and and won I don't know how many Olympics like that with his pal, another guy you might have heard of by the name of Johnny Weissmuller, like that, who ended up playing Tarzan in all those movies like that, and they actually teamed up and won, beat Hitler's swimmers like that, and which is always a good thing as far as I'm concerned when you can trash the Nazis. And anyway, like that, they actually had an instance off Redondo Beach, I think it was, where they were out surfing and out swimming, like that, training for the Olympics, like that. And this boat came around the corner there, and a storm came in, and they went down, like that, and they used their surfboards to go out in this storm to get these guys and bring them back.
So that's a real story.
Incredible story. I thought, I got to use that, like that. And Walton Henry kind of like, resemble a little bit of that Johnny Weissmuller, Duke Kahanamoku dynamic there. And then I guess that the point being that, like, there's that moment, whenever they get back in there, and of course there's some contraband that's rolling up onto the shore too, which makes this a kind of clandestine, kind of situation. And the sheriff of Los Angeles County is there, like that, and waiting for them when they get back to the beach. And, and he's questioning Walt, like that. He's like, okay, so, you weren't on that boat then, like that. And Walt says, no, sir, we weren't, like that. And he goes, you don't know any of the people that were on that boat, right? Like that. And he's like, no, sir, we didn't. And he said, well, what would cause you to even think about, taking your surfboard in a storm like that and going out there, like it in the rocks, and trying to save those guys? What would make you think of even remotely, attempting something like that? And Walt just looks at him and says, because it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And right there, that's one of the key elements where we get to see a little glimpse of not only who Walt is, but who it is that he may become as the decades roll by.
And throughout the book, that is what he does repeatedly. He rescues somebody. There's somebody in need, and he won't walk away. He won't let it go. He's going to step in because it's the right thing to do, as you pointed out, and he just rescues people. Sometimes I think rescues them from themselves, but
yeah, a lot of times. I don't know. In some ways, like the biggest difference, that he has, like, and I mean, obviously, he's a little more sophisticated in his thought processes as the decades roll on, like that. And obviously, if he's an offensive lineman in a Rose Bowl championship team, he and Henry both, and Henry was a running back for Berkeley, like that. And so they're probably in this particular book the best physical shape they're ever going to be in the entirety of the whole series. Like, and it works for Walt like that because he has an adversary there, in this little town that he has to deal with that makes it a little bit difficult like that. But they are 22 years old and in the best physical shape they're ever going to be in their life. The bad news is they're 22 years old and maybe not as smart as they should be as they go into these situations. And to answer your question, it did come back to me, was the Heart Mountain question, like that. And you're absolutely right. Like that, what happened was I had always been very, very interested in Heart Mountain. And there were a number of books that were written not only about the internment camp there in Heart Mountain, but also the political unrest that was involved with the court cases of them, trying to force these Japanese Americans that were interned like that into going into the military like that, and their position being, you want us to go fight for a democracy that you haven't given us. And so there was a lot of information there that I had, floating around in my head, because I would make the drive over to Cody and just stop, up there at the top of the internment camp. And at that point in time, there was no visitors center. There was no museum and theater like that. Now there's this multi-million-dollar facility over there like that. But as spectacular as it is, it was still kind of impressing like that to go over there and walk into those barracks and those tar paper shacks and see the doors hanging off the hinges, look at the windows all blown out and the wind blowing through there, and look and see a table that still had, dishes sitting on it from when, they'd left in such a hurry like that. And so I had all that information about Heart Mountain in my head. And who knew that, I was going to take it and just transplant it all the way down in Arizona like that, in Bone Valley like that, and make it a component in this particular novel.
Greg, another aspect of your writing that really appeals to me is the Native American. And I'm a little bit curious. You name them that you call Henry Cheyenne Nation sometimes. Sometimes you call them by different names. I guess there's really no special sensitivity about calling Native people by various names, but what a marvelous character he is. And I didn't know before this how well his education. I mean, he got, as a character, these are both very well educated people.
Yes, I know.
They have
Oh, yeah.
degrees. Yeah.
Oh yes. You know, with Henry like that, I can go through the list for you like that. I mean, where my ranch is just to the south of the Northern Cheyenne of the Crow Reservation, and so you know, I'm a big believer in the Wallace Stegner quote about the greatest piece of fiction ever written is the disclaimer at the beginning of every book that says nobody in this book is based off of anybody alive or dead, and so you know, and that's a problem when you're in a state with only 500,000 people in it. Like, but it's even worse up on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation, where there are only about 3,000 enrolled members of the Northern Cheyenne tribe. And so, you know, for me, it's a lot easier to base a lot of those characters off of people that I know.
I'm sure that's true.
And Henry is based off of a good friend of mine, Marcus Red Thunder. And one of the things I can always tell, you know, if somebody's writing native characters and they don't have a sense of humor, that they've never been around natives before in their lives like that, because they work on about 17 different layers of irony. And if you're not aware of that irony, you get to be the butt of that irony. And so, you know, for me, the big challenge there is, you know, is representing them as honestly as I can. It would be, I think, excuse the term criminal, for me to not have them be a part of the books simply because, you know, they are a part of the world, you know, in which I live. And so when I'm trying to give you an honest and accurate representation of that place, like I have to try and make sure that I do that right. And they're a major component in that, you know.
Well, let me ask you this. If I may ask you, how did you get to be a writer? I've only got a couple minutes left, so give me a shorthand. How did you get to be a writer?
Well, I came from a family of storytellers, and I was the worst one. And I thought, you know what? Well, maybe if I can't, you know, say them, maybe I can, you know, write them. And that got me started, like that writing, like that. But I never got anything published until I finally sat down and got started on The Cold Dish, the very first Walt Longmire book. And it was a little tougher maybe than, you know, I might have supposed, like that. But we'll have to leave that story for another day, like that. And I was lucky enough, like that, to get picked up, you know, by a powerful agent in New York, like that, and picked up by Viking Penguin. In New York, like that, and they really liked the book, and they're the ones that kind of sat me down and said, "Hey, we really like these books or this book, look at it, and we would like you to maybe think about doing some more of these books." And here I am.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Keep writing. You're going to be continuing to write this for the next 10 years? I mean, you've got a few years left in you.
Oh yeah, I think that 10 years is a conservative estimate. Like that, I think I can do 20 in me like that. And I don't know. I mean, the way I look at it is you know, when you start something like this, it's a little intimidating because you think to yourself, okay, you know, am I really going to be able to do this? You know, but the big question becomes like, do these characters have more stories to tell?
It's the characters.
There's so many more stories to tell. I'll never get them all told, is what it'll turn out to be.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
My pleasure, my dear. We have to get you more engaged here on the next time around, like that. He and I are going to have to shut up. Well, my wife had the best quote about that. She says that Walt is who Craig would like to be in 10 years. It's just he's off to an incredibly slow start. So.
Thank you so much, Craig Johnson.
Goodbye.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. We invite you back next time for another look at Eyes on Books.